Welcome to The Explainer. So, today we're unpacking a really fascinating, highly structured approach to rapid learning. Have you ever looked at a massive, complex subject like, say, human anatomy, and just felt completely overwhelmed? The sheer volume of bones, muscles, nerves, the whole shebang, it's enough to make anyone's head spin. But what if you could conquer that mountain, not with years of meandering study, but through a hyper-focused, personalized curriculum based entirely on one specific source? Well, our text today gives us an exact blueprint for doing just that. We're going to deconstruct this ambitious, incredibly precise framework designed for total mastery. And that actually begs a fundamental question, one you might want to ask yourself right now. How do you actually structure the perfect anatomy curriculum? Think about it. If you had to design a learning plan entirely from scratch to take you from a total novice to having a firm grasp of the human body, where would you even start? Most of us would probably just grab a textbook, open to page 1, and start reading, right? But, as we'll see from our source material today, passive reading just isn't going to cut it here. We're looking at a framework that demands serious action, rigid structure, and intense focus. So let's look at the exact blueprint we're deconstructing today. Okay, let's dive into this. The source material gives us a really specific directive. Quote, make for me a personal course for topic, Learning Human Anatomy, the video. Based on this video, design for me a complete 7-day course, end quote. Now notice the command here. It's not asking for a general overview or a handful of study tips. It is demanding a complete personal course. It relies entirely on a specific video as the foundation, meaning that source material itself becomes the bound universe of knowledge. But honestly, the real kicker here is the time frame. 7? Just 7 days, literally 1 week. This intensely condensed timeline requested by the source is what makes this blueprint so incredibly demanding. It stresses that an entire foundational understanding of human anatomy has to be built in just 7 days. You don't have months to casually wander through the cardiovascular system. You have exactly 1 week to digest, process, and completely master the material presented. And this crazy constraint? It forces the curriculum to be relentlessly efficient. There's absolutely zero room for filler. Every single day has to count for a massive amount of cognitive heavy lifting. So how do we actually achieve that heavy lifting? Well, the source continues with this explicitly clear directive. Each day contains a clear and direct lesson, a practical exercise, a short test, active recall, a real application in my life. These are the core mechanics requested here. And to be clear, this isn't just a friendly suggestion, it's a strict daily regimen. This 4-part structure is the absolute secret engine of this personalized curriculum. Without this exact sequence repeating every single day, that 7-day timeline, it would be completely impossible to pull off. So the crucial point is that these 4 pillars, the direct lesson, the exercise, the test, and the application, they aren't just a menu of options. They must happen together every single day of the timeline, without fail. You can't just, watch a lesson on Monday and say you'll do the exercise on Tuesday. No way. The reason this structure is so ruthlessly effective is because all 4 steps are tightly packed into a single day's session. It creates this closed-loop system of learning that forces you to immediately process the information. Let's break down exactly what the source text is demanding from each of these individual pillars. Okay, so we start with Pillar 1, a clear and direct lesson. This is your foundational input for the day. Before any action can be taken, the learning has to start with direct instruction. And remember, the source explicitly anchors this to a video. So your day begins with focused, undistracted consumption of the core material. It specifically says clear and direct, which means absolutely no fluff, no long-winded introductions, just the pure, unadulterated anatomical facts that you need to learn that day. But as our blueprint clearly shows, consumption is literally just the first step. Let's move 2 and see how this builds, because the source explicitly demands a practical exercise immediately following the lesson. So Pillar 2 ensures that the information doesn't just sit there passively in your brain. Once that clear and direct lesson is over, you have to immediately do something with that information. This is right where the curriculum pivots from passive to active. You're taking those anatomy concepts from the lesson and you're manipulating them, drawing them out, organizing them. It forces you, the learner, to actively engage with the material right out of the gate. Then, we move straight into the testing phase with Pillar 3. Now, our source text doesn't just ask for a passive review of the notes you just scribbled down. Nope, it specifically mandates a short test. And honestly, this is a fascinating constraint. A test forces a completely different cognitive process than just rereading your notes. It essentially forces you to prove to yourself what you actually retained from the lesson and the practical exercise. The source is making absolutely sure that you cannot escape a daily, head-on confrontation with what you do and what you do not know. What's really interesting here is the specific parenthetical requirement included in the source text: active recall. The prompt didn't just say test me, it specifically requested active recall. What does that mean? It means actively stimulating your memory to retrieve a piece of information without looking at the source material at all. It's the difference between, say, recognizing a muscle name on a multiple choice list and having to pull that exact name out of thin air while staring at a completely blank diagram. The source relies heavily on this specific method because actively retrieving information is what actually cements it into your long-term memory. And this brilliantly illustrates the underlying philosophy of this entire curriculum. Take a look at the balance derived directly from the source's instructions. On the input side, we have just one single element, the clear and direct lesson. But on the actionable output side, we have three distinct requirements: the practical exercise, the short test via active recall, and the real application. The underlying mechanics here massively heavily weigh actionable output over passive watching. Basically, for every one step of taking information in, there are three distinct steps of forcing that information back out. Which brings us to Pillar 4. This is the final, and honestly, arguably the most profound requirement of the daily regimen: a real application in my life. The source demands that the anatomy lesson be mapped directly back to the learner's own physical reality. It's just not enough to know where a muscle is on a textbook diagram. The curriculum requires you to locate it on your own body, or to recognize how it functions when you perform a completely mundane daily task, like picking up your morning cup of coffee. This grounds what could be an intense, dry academic study into absolute, undeniable reality. I really want you to think about this for a second. Why does relating anatomy to your own body make the abstract concrete? Well, when you fulfill this requirement of the source text, you are no longer learning about the human body. You are learning about your body. It takes something super abstract like a dense lesson on the musculoskeletal system and turns it into a lived experience. This final daily step ensures that the knowledge isn't just crammed into your head for a test, but is actually integrated into your understanding of your own everyday life. So what we are really looking at here is a highly effective funnel for learning. This really short piece of source text acts as a masterclass blueprint in curriculum design. By demanding a super tight 7-day timeline, and by perfectly blending a single input, direct instruction, with three distinct, immediate, and highly practical outputs, it creates this inescapable environment for retention. It makes absolutely sure that the learner cannot just passively float through the material. They are forced to engage, forced to recall, and forced to apply. So, we've deconstructed this exact framework straight from our source. It is aggressive, it's heavily weighted toward action, and it's profoundly personal. So, the only thing left to ask is this: how will you apply this 4-step daily blueprint to the next complex topic you want to learn? Will you dare to condense it into just 7 days and really commit to those rigorous daily outputs of practice, active recall, and real-world application? The framework is there, and it's yours to use. Until next time, keep exploring.